Today in the show, Lemn Sissay, a renowned award-winning poet and playwright with so many lists of success in his profession. He was born in the UK and raised in foster care, but Lemn is also well known in his quest for identity. He found his roots back in Ethiopia, and fast forward, he's now launching his book entitled My Name is Why, and you have to stay with us all the way to find out more. Thank you so much for your time, Lemn. It's really a pleasure having you.
Thank you so much for inviting me. It's an honor to be here, yes.
So let me take you back to your childhood. You know, I've been following your interviews in different media, and you've been saying you were smiling and happy up until 12 age. So when did that realization that you're different, you are black skin comes from?
I think, I mean, when I was a baby and throughout my childhood, there was only one person who looked like me. My skin color, my heritage, all of the people who were around me were English, white, and yeah, so I knew very early that I was different.
How early was that?
I'd say I knew from the age of 6, but I realized when I was 12, I think.
I'm not going to go deeper into that childhood story, but you know, it's not my focus area. But do you think racism is much better down those days in the current world, including the UK and elsewhere?
I think racism, there was racism in England then, in the 1960s and 70s, and I think there is racism in England now, and I think the racism now is different to what it was then. Then the racism was towards anybody of colour in England. Now the racism in England is towards other Europeans as well as people from Africa. But I think that England is probably one of the least racist countries in Europe, possibly.
I mean, how do you see this shift, you know, earlier in those times it's like the color. Now it's getting even, you know, more focused than, you know, than before. So can we say it's less practiced or more practiced?
Racism is like an illness, and it's there. It was there in the 1960s, and it is in England now, and I don't know if it's better or if it's worse, but it is poisonous. And anybody who is racist is a poisoned person, you know.
So having gone all the things you've gone through, what is your perception on adoption and related issues? You know, for instance, the government of Ethiopia is trying now to discourage the external domestic and focus on the local adoption. Do you think that's a better option for African child to be domestically adopted so that they could retain their own identity in their own society? What's your view on that?
Can you imagine now if I could say, I know some very middle class, well-off Ethiopians here in Ethiopia. So maybe we should get the middle-class Ethiopians to come to England and to take the white children who are very poor. Very, very poor. There's many of them in England. So maybe we should bring those children to Ethiopia so that they can understand a better way of life, a more spiritual life, and a richer life. Now, if we were to do that to those English children, do you think the English government would be okay with that?
No, definitely.
Right. And it's exactly the same thing. You know, children are being taken because they're told that they will have a better life away from their own family. There was a documentary recently on Al Jazeera called Girl in Return, you know Amy, and that's a terrible story. So that's happening now. My story happened in 1960s. So there you can see, you know, between the 1960s racism and racism in today. And the only example we're using is adoption and fostering. You know, so that's a very good example. Things are still bad.
Yeah, that takes me to my next question. You know, from childhood, you've been lectured on what Africa is, how poor it is, and everything that comes with it all the way. So when you first realized that your root is back in Ethiopia, so do you have time in you that, you know, to think about what Africa is? Oh my God, I belong to Africa, something like that. And what was your shock back in the ground back then?
Well, I grew up with people who told me Africa was, you know, backward, Africa was underdeveloped, it was immature. People in Europe can, not all people, you know, but a lot of people, they infantilize Africa. They suffer from a lack of awareness. And this is what happened with me. You know, they told me Africa is this, that, the other. But as I grow, I realized it can't be. And I think they were unreliable witnesses. So, coming to Africa myself, firstly to the Gambia, where my mother was working with for the United Nations at 21 years of age. Then I came to Ethiopia at 29 years of age for the first time. And now I don't care what they think anymore. I know. You know, I know. I am part of Ethiopia. I'm part of the continent of Africa. I know, you know, I know there are great artists here, great intellects, great lawyers, great architects. We have a great and proud history, great kings and emperors, and great wars, and great peacemaking, and, you know, this country, Ethiopia, the Muslim lives next to the Christian. Look at England. You know, there are people dying, fighting. There is panic. It's on red alert. You know, the entire country is on alert. You know, we are blessed here in Africa with all of the complications that we have.
The reason I'm asking is about this complication, you know, there is a big debate between this, you know, African child have to be adopted in Africa domestically, and the other thought, you know, well, they are good off when they are adopted outside because they have good education and a good standard of living. So why do you complain about?
We often think of adoption as, hey, my child can go get an education, they can, you know, etc., etc. But we don't realize that the child is being farmed. Papers are signed, legal documents are signed. This is very important because I think that there is a very good relationship to be had between Ethiopia and Europe or America, where children go to get education, they stay with their family, their family can be their mom and dad while they're there. But this idea that they are owned by the parents in Denmark or England, this is where the issue is. So when the child wants to communicate with the parent or the parent wants to communicate with the child, it becomes difficult. You know, the letters don't get passed over because the parents are like, she's my child. Yeah. This is the complication. I think it's a complication of language and communication. Many people in the villages, they'll say, well, my child can get an education, this is good. But they don't realize that actually what is happening is a contractual obligation for that child to be parented by It's two different cultural ideas. Does this make sense? And the child will always feel when there is a complication as they get older. So the best way to communicate in terms of adoption and fostering is to be really truthful and to say to the child, oh, you can go back to Ethiopia, you can see your parents. You know, we in Ethiopia, we travel around the world. Okay, we go to the West and we come back, we learn, etc. The West doesn't do that with Africa. So people come to Africa, often they believe they're saving Africa. They're saving this child. They don't think about the adults. Children are beautiful. But these people don't think of us as adults. Does that make sense? Yeah. You know, they infantilize us. So a fostering, adoption and the birth parents, this should be an adult conversation. You can have my child, it's fine, give them education. Never let them forget where they're from or who they are, because if you do, they will feel great confusion and you may even hate them. You know, if you're going to adopt a child from Ethiopia, then you better love Ethiopian culture. Because all you say to the child then is, oh, your country is not good enough for you because they couldn't keep you. Oh, your country is poor and dirty. Oh, blah, 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 blah. Adopt the child. Love Ethiopia. Come back again and again and again. It's not that far away.
I think that's a very important message for the government and for those who are working in the adoption area. Absolutely. You know?
The reason that the government has stopped this is because there has been so much bad practice. It's not that international adoption is not a good idea. Yeah. It is a good idea for any child to be adopted. What is bad is the ownership of the child and the denigration of Ethiopia.
In one of your interviews, I heard you say you have forgiven your foster parents, yes. And that's a very good thing, I think, because, you know, healing comes from forgiving sometimes. But have you forgiven your mom and the system?
My birth mother name is Lemn Sissay. I was stolen from her. It's in my book. This proves it. You can see in my book where she tries to get me back, you know. So I totally forgive her. I don't think she's done anything wrong, to be honest, you know. And my father, you know, he didn't know. He didn't know about me.
Yeah, it's already in the past. But my question is, have you forgiven the system, you know, because, you know...
have I forgiven the system?
That made you go through all the way, you know?
I don't think it's very difficult to forgive something which is not
there.
The system is run by lots of faceless people. And the people who did the things to me that they did are no longer, you know, there.
But you know what? I'm trying to relate this to our situation at this point in time in Ethiopia, you know. We are now in a situation, actually it goes to Africa as well. We are now in a situation where ethnic tension is, you know, at the peak.
Yes.
And if we go deeper into that part, we are, you know, creating this tension based on the disputed past, you know. Those in the system have done this and that. Is there any way to forgive a system and move forward, you know?
The disputed past, isn't that quite incredible? Because the past is always an area that we can argue about. Yeah. So are we going to make a choice to say that the past is past and that we can find a way forward by hearing each other, by listening to each other, and by working through everything, and by recognizing that there is a lot of hurt, a lot of pain out there. And are we healing or are we picking the scar? picking each other's scar. You know, this process of healing, it has to happen through forgiveness, and it has to happen through kindness. These are not just, you know, invisible concepts, that they're action, you know, so important, because hate makes hate. That's it. Hate makes hate. It's, you know, yeah. And so I no longer, you know, hate the people who hurt me in my past, because I realized that it becomes part of me, the hate, the hatred. If I give out hatred, it becomes part of me. If I give out anger, then it becomes part of me as well. So I'm healing myself by helping the people who hurt me. So the system in England stole my family from me. It imprisoned me as a child, it changed my name, and then it threw me out over 18 years. I've proved this legally in a court. I've taken them to court and I've won. They settled outside of court. I have forgiven them. You know, the first thing that I did was a Christmas dinner, put on a big Christmas dinner for people who were in care in the area of the people who were bad to me in the system.
Which is a very good way of doing it. You were talking about Christmas dinner.
Yeah.
And by the way, it's a very human way of giving to human.
Yeah,
I like it,
right.
you know, there is no organization and something.
That's right. You got it.
So have you ever planned to have that kind of session here in Africa somewhere or in
That's
Addis?
a really good idea. I mean, wow. Wouldn't it be good to do a Christmas dinner in Addis or Hawassa or Gondar or, you know, wherever. One day I will do that.
Let's talk about your book now. For the very beginning, it's called My Name is Why.
Yes.
By the way, do you know why your name is Why?
I don't know why my name is Why.
And you're writing a book.
I know. Because I think it's called My Name is Why because I did not know what lemon meant until I was 29. Because I found my mother when I was 21, and it took me another 8 years to find out many things.
What's the core point you want to communicate in this book?
Well, I think the core point that I want to make in My Name is Why is that whatever gets thrown at you, you know, you can succeed. As you know, sometimes it's very difficult, life, but you can succeed. I think maybe it's saying that. I mean, My Name is Why is about what happened to me, and I think our stories are important and that we all deserve the right to tell them, you know. So I don't know what the take home is actually.
I mean, you are a very outspoken person when it comes to your background, the way you go through all the way.
Yeah.
So, you know, having all compiled in here, it's a very good, you know, message for all, for all human,
Yes.
but specifically to African child,
Yes.
you know, with different exposure and hardship going through. So it's really good to have hope all the way. You know, that's what I was wondering. So you're launching your book in Addis. Why?
Are you kidding me? Like, I have to, my book has to come to Ethiopia. I mean, my book is about a boy that was stolen from Ethiopia, you know, from his mother. And so it's very important to me that my book is here. My friends are here. And I love it here. I feel at home here. I really do.
Can you read us something from your book which you believe is worth communicating at this time for our audience?
Oh, wow. I mean, at the beginning of the book, I tell you why I'm writing it. In 2015, following a 30-year campaign to get my records, the chief executive of Wigan Council, Donna Hall, wrote me a letter. She had my records. Within a few months, I received 4 thick folders of documents marked A, B, C, and D. Click, clack, clack. On reading them, I knew. I took the authority to court. How does a government steal a child and then imprison him? How does it keep it a secret? This story is how. It is for my brothers and sisters on my mother's side and my father's side. This is for my mother and father and my aunts and uncles and for Ethiopians.
Very beautiful. So you're demanding the government, for doing all the ill things.
Yeah.
And it's very, courageous in that time, at your age, going after the government,
Yeah.
asking and suing for all the deeds back then. How do you get that courage?
I don't know. I don't know where it comes from. I don't know where it comes from. Maybe it comes from the fact that I am Ethiopian. That I had nobody, I had no family. And you can see from my book, from the picture, this is Habesha, this is Ethiopian. The way I'm stood, everything. And yet I'd never met a black person. I'd never met a person of color. Ever. I'd never met an Ethiopian. But you can see that's an Ethiopian child. So I'm just getting back to where I should be. By coming back, I come back to Ethiopia now twice a year, 3 times a year. I brought a very famous television presenter here from the BBC who's filming while I'm here. I brought a BBC radio documentary here. We recorded in the African Jazz Village a few years ago. So and now I get to teach England about Ethiopia. Now I get to tell the world about this incredible, incredible country. Now I get to tell the world about Ethiopian Airlines. Now I get to tell the world about how the growth that is happening in Ethiopia at the moment, the excitement. And people, whenever growth happens, conflict can happen as well. And, I, as a lost son of Ethiopia who's found his way back home, I hope that we can see our way through this.
Yeah. Well, we're glad you challenged the government, because now you're taking, Africa and Ethiopia in perspective. Everywhere you go, you talk about your origin, yeah, and about the country and everything. Yeah. And I've been following on your writing when the notes of Theodorus here, the notes of the Theodorus II, King Theodorus II was coming here. Yes. Have you stopped that, work with those groups who were trying to bring in Alamayo's body back in Ethiopia?
No, I haven't stopped at all. Oh my gosh. Look, the Queen, Emperor Theodorus's wife, yeah, Hirut, I think it was. Is that wrong? Pardon? Excuse me. Yeah. Her clothes are in the British Museum. Her clothes, man. When Emperor Theodorus was lay on the floor, the soldiers cut his clothes off so they could take bits of it. And his hair, this is primitive. He did an incredibly noble thing in many ways. And there is a history of that in Ethiopia as well, that nobility. So I want the British to give back to Ethiopia what was stolen in the late 1800s at the Battle of Magdala. They stole manuscripts. They stole the tabots, you know, the tabots that we need for churches here. So I will do everything I can to get these things back. I know that my friend Ma'aza Mengist in America is also campaigning.
The same thing.
Yeah, but I think that as much as I want Al-Mayu's remains to come, the tabots are what are important, because they are living documents which shouldn't be seen and should be in the churches so that people can pray around them, etc. They're live documents.
While you were here in Addis last time, I think it was 2 months or something before, you met the Ethiopian Prime Minister.
That's right, yeah.
Abiy. What did you guys talk about? To start
Well,
with.
firstly, you've got to know it was all in Amharic.
Really?
Of course.
The conversation?
Yeah, because he spoke with, there was a few of us, it was about
Yeah.
10, 15, 10 artists, 15 artists. So he spoke of where Ethiopia was at the moment, what his ideas were for growing Ethiopia, and truthfully what the challenges were, and how, you know, he needed people to believe in a united Ethiopia for a united Ethiopia to happen. It can't happen alone, you know, so there needs to be trust, etc. It was quite beautiful. He brought in Boketu Seyum, and other artists, Ida Mulane, people I know, love and respect, you know, and people who are of independent mind. And for the Prime Minister to be so open to the arts community, who are quite a serious community. Ethiopian artists, from the ones I know, are very serious about what they do. And remember that the Ethiopian artists, whether it's Boketu or it's Ida Mulane or Raku Sile from the Addis Fine Art, or Zoma, or wherever, those artists travel around the world. We, you know, we tell the story of Ethiopia, and we are proud of it, you know, but it is your artists and your creative people who will tell the story of Ethiopia.
By the way, have you traveled in Ethiopia? Have you seen places?
Yeah,
To
I've
begin
been to
with, have you
Gondar.
been in Unity Park, right at the palace? It's open now
I
for
went
any
to
public.
it, yeah.
So what's the
I was
impression?
there, it was beautiful. I mean, the park is beautiful. What I like about the park, most of all, is that what was guarded is now open. So if we think about that, the way the park is, as the way we could be, what was guarded could be open.
And about places in Ethiopia?
I've been to Hawassa, been to Shashamani, been to Gondar, but the truth is, I spend a lot of time in Addis. This is what I think I should do. I think I should come here to live for a year, and I think I should learn Amharic within that time, and that would be a beautiful thing to do that.
Before we wrap up, I just want you to have one read, at least, of you, from your book.
What I shall do is I shall read my mother's letter. This letter was written in 1968 when my mother was, well, I'll just read it. So it's from the Seventh-day Adventist Church, P.O. Box 145, Addis Ababa, 4th of July.
What was your age back then?
1968.
1968.
So I was about 8 months old. And she's writing to a Mr. Norman Goldthorpe, the children's officer, in Wigan, in England. She says, "Dear Mr. Goldthorpe, You might have wondered where I disappeared, but I got a telegram telling me that I had to come to Ethiopia because of my father's serious illness. I came the very next day. I graduated from Newbold College in England with God's help. With God's help, I managed to pass all my examinations. When I came home, I found my daddy in hospital, and it took me quite a while to recognize my own father. He is just skin and bone. I didn't expect him to live one day, but somehow he is still alive. It's just a miracle. So much about myself. Could you please help me in answering the following questions? 1. If I want to get Lem out here, what steps should I take? I would very much like to bring him. Lem needs someone to take care of him. He needs to be in his own country, with his own colour, with his own people. I don't want him to face discrimination. 2. Could you give me his foster parents' address? 3. I would like him as soon as possible. Please answer me very soon. I would like to get over this problem soon. I know life is a problem, but it is good to solve the very urgent one first. Yours sincerely, Lemn Sissay. And that's my mum. Let me just give you this reply. Dear Miss Sissay, I was very surprised to receive your letter and to find that you are back once more in Ethiopia. I realise that it would be best for your son to be amongst his own family, but I must take very great care that all would be well for him if he was sent out to you. He is in very good hands at the present time and is with excellent Christian folk who are doing extremely well for him. I'm afraid that I cannot give you their name and address. You will realise that this is because they will eventually adopt him, providing, of course, you give consent. Please give this a great deal of serious thought and write to me again.
Thank you so much, Lemn, for taking time to be with Addis Dialogue with ETV. It's really a pleasure having you.